morning. Hi, I'm Agnieszka Carpenter, and I'm the Executive Director of BioMain. BioMain is the organization that put together Maine Bioscience Day this year. And I'm super excited to have Patrick Breeding with me. You probably saw Patrick in the videos this year. He has a company called Marin Skincare. And before we start, I just wanted to ask our guests to maybe say in the chat box which schools you're from. And then if you have questions for Patrick, you can either raise your hand or you can put the questions in the chat. Don't be shy. I have a bunch of questions that were sent to us beforehand. Today, I think we have a small group because Patrick was gracious enough to give his time to us today and on Friday. So on Friday, we actually have a big group, but the small group might actually be nice and cozy. So we have about 25 minutes, and I'd like to start by asking Patrick to just talk about your career, how you got to where you are, and any details you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. It looks like we have Greenville Middle School, and then another. So you probably know a little bit about my story if you watched the Marin Skincare segment of the Bioscience Day. But my name's Patrick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a skincare startup that uses a protein found in lobster in our products, specifically for people with dry, aggravated skin conditions. You usually don't hear lobster and skincare in the same sentence, so it's kind of a unique story. We were biomedical engineers at the University of Maine in undergrad, and we also went to grad school so we could learn a little bit more about what we do and how to do cool things in the field of bioscience. And in graduate school, we worked with lobster scientists to find different ways to use parts of the lobster that are not currently utilized. You usually think lobster and seafood, but what about the shell and what about everything else that isn't used? So we were interested in finding bioscience applications for lobster processing byproducts. We focused on this protein, and this protein has a really interesting function within the lobster that protects the internal health and the tissue of the lobster by transporting liquid and oxygen around. So as we started to read into the scientific literature and all the studies that were done about proteins like this, we found that the same way that this protein can help transport water and oxygen throughout the body could actually help the skin transport oxygen and hydration to the skin, which would help the skin cells on the barrier of your skin grow back and repair itself if it was damaged, for example, and also hydrate it so it stays nice and moisturized. It was a very convenient thing to discover because at the time my partner had incredibly severe eczema, which is caused by many things, but really it's a problem where your skin is damaged. And you can kind of think about the cells in your skin like the bricks of a house. So the bricks hold all the moisture inside of the house. But if there are no bricks there, or if there's a little bit of an issue and maybe some of the bricks aren't completely filled in well, that moisture in your skin or in the house will just evaporate right out. This is probably something that everybody right now can relate to as it's getting cold and dry. Usually you think of your skin as, oh, my skin's dry, it doesn't have enough moisture. Well, the reason is because you probably gave your skin enough moisture, but it's leaving because those bricks, those skin cells on the barrier of your skin aren't holding it in. So we found that this protein in lobster actually really helps repair those bricks, those cells. And it really helps people with dry, aggravated skin conditions like my partner's eczema. And I know you already saw this, so there's no need to elaborate there. But I've had a really interesting journey going from being a person in middle school and high school interested in science, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was very motivated by the amount of cancer that kind of afflicted my family, particularly my dad. So I always knew I wanted to help people and change people's quality of life through the vehicle or the lens of bioscience. And I also never thought that I would become an entrepreneur or start a business. And entrepreneur is just a word. It's just a person that brings things into the world that helps people or provides value to people through the mechanism or the means of building a business to give them a product or a service. So it used to be this very confusing, I don't know what it means to be an entrepreneur. And then one day we just became it when we started to develop our own products. So it's been a really interesting journey learning how to do the science and how does the science work and become a good scientist and researcher. And then to say, well, how can I bring this into the world? Oh, through a business. Let's figure out how to build the business. Let's figure out how are we going to get all the stuff we need to make our products? How much is it going to cost? How much money do we need to pay for everything? How long is it going to take? What are the specific regulations and rules we need to adhere to bring this into the world? And how are we going to let people know about it? You know, how are we going to build our brand? When you think about products, I mean, this is obviously our product. You kind of look at the label and you don't really think too much about, oh, there's a lot of words on this and there's colors and there's shapes and stuff. And so much thought goes into the marketing and how we appeal to people. You know, we could have called this Patrick's lobster sauce, but we didn't because no one would want that, you know? So we thought a lot about all aspects of creating what we've created, and it's been really exciting. So I'd love to answer any questions you guys have, or make it an engaging session and actually valuable for you. Whether or not you feel compelled to ask if the cream tastes like lobster, which, spoiler, it doesn't. It tastes like something that you probably shouldn't put in your mouth. It tastes like any cream, you know. Or ask about, you know, what it's like to be a bioscience researcher or stuff about lobster. I would love to answer any questions.
Okay, so we have a couple. The first one, I have it on my list. It came from Bangor and I find it just kind of cool. So I'm going to ask you that one first. And it is, Mr. Breeding, how do you milk a lobster?
Yeah, so quick maybe context for why that's a good question is the way that we get the protein that is found in lobster, it is found in their circulatory fluid, so the fluid that just goes all throughout their body, and it's dissolved in that fluid. So we have found a way to go in with a vacuum system right before the lobsters become seafood, but right after they go through what's called a stunner. So a stunner sends electrical pulses through the lobster's body and turns off their nervous system, which is kind of a cool bioscience thing, because every time you move your body, really all that is your brain sending electrical signals down through your muscles and saying, go, like move your finger, move your hand, twist, do all those things. So it's the same way that the electricity and the lights in your house work. It's kind of the way that the electrical signals in your body work. If you send the right electricity through, you can turn that off or turn it back on. So the seafood company we work with found a way to send electrical pulses through the lobster, turn off their nervous system so they can't feel anything. So they're processed ethically and humanely. And then we found a way to go in again with the vacuum and take the fluid from the lobster. And we call it milking because once you take the fluid from it, if you were to throw it back into the water, it would regenerate it. It's really, really cool. The lobster can do so many cool things, from regenerating this fluid to popping off their claw and regenerating an entire claw back. So maybe some homework for you guys to do is next time you go to your grocery store that has lobsters in it, look for a lobster with a big claw and a little claw, and you'll know that that little claw used to be a big one, but it got popped off and it's in the process of regenerating it. yeah, so we figured out how to milk lobster, and we're probably the first people that do that. It's a bit of an odd thing to say, but it's been very exciting to do it, and I've milked lobsters for hundreds and hundreds of hours this summer. It is hard work.
Hmm, I'm sure. So one question we have from our guests is, are there different types of lobsters that work best for your product?
That is a really good question, and I will be happy to elaborate to the extent of my understanding, because um, there are so many things we want to learn about, and there are some cool things we've noticed. So we haven't necessarily found that different types of lobsters are best for the product, but the lobsters have an annual or around the year cycle of molting their shell. So they kind of pop out of their shell, and they regenerate a new shell. It's called the molting cycle, and that's, if you've ever heard soft shell and hard shell, that's when the lobster shell is almost like it's aged for a long time. It's very hard, it's very durable, and then it will kind of find its way into developing a new shell. What we found is that uh, correlated to the molting cycle, so as the shell gets harder, it's getting colder. So it'll get harder and harder and harder as the water gets colder, so throughout the winter and early spring. And then when it gets into a soft shell, it starts to warm up again, the waters. So what we found is that this protein that's in there also helps, it helps protect the muscles and the tissue and the meat from freezing in the water, which is interesting. Have you ever thought of how marine organisms and lobsters and fish and whales, have you ever wondered how they don't freeze in the ocean? And a lot of the times it's because they have anti-freeze proteins or just things in their body that help it from not getting too cold and turning into literal ice. So sorry for the roundabout answer. As it gets colder, the lobster produces more protein so that it can protect itself from freezing and getting too cold. So for us, when we're milking these lobsters, looking for the protein, there's more protein for us. So winter right now is the best time for us to be, it's milk and lobster season right now.
That was actually a really cool answer, and I did not know that some animals have antifreeze proteins. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you don't think about the same with animals that get too high up in the atmosphere and are flying and have low oxygen, right? When they're up as high as planes and stuff. It's really interesting to think about that.
Mhm. And the next question I see is, how did you actually find the protein in the lobster? Was it accidental? Were you looking for it? How did that happen?
Yeah, so we had partnered with lobster scientists that had already done a lot of the discovery work for us. They had they had been researching different mechanisms of how this protein in the lobster can help with things like cancer, viruses, and that was actually the first research I did with them, was exposing cancer cells to this protein, and we saw that adding the protein to cancer cells could help the cancer, which is really just a disease where cells grow and grow and grow and they never stop. It helped those cells that were uncontrollably growing shut down and stop growing. So they had already done a lot of this research, and it was it was it was a mix of reading into the scientific studies that were done on other similar things, which was really the discovery into it, diving into the science. What type of science has been done? Can I look over here that what type of lobster science, what type of skincare science, what type of protein science, and bringing it all together. And then we just started to try it. And as we did things in the lab, we figured, why not explore it? It could be useful. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how we discovered it. It was more credit to the lobster scientists than to us, but once we realized the potential, we made it go as a company.
Mhm. Here's something I'm wondering too, a question from Greenville Middle School. How much protein per lobster do you get?
That's funny. It ends up correlating almost exactly to um, one of these requires one lobster. Very, very simple, and it makes the math very easy for us. But we're trying to improve that, make the yield of the protein we get better, as well as work with the seafood companies so that they have a way to get it quicker, do a better job. They're more efficient at getting it, because there is so much potential going literally down the drain. This fluid from the lobster, when it turns into seafood, is literally becoming something that is going down the drain. And we probably get less than 0.25% of what is there. So, and we're producing a pretty good amount of these. So there's a lot of potential in each lobster processor.
Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating that you actually are recycling something that would normally be thrown out, and you can actually make something valuable out of it. I think that's super cool. Another question I have here is, did you have to research any side effects for your product?
Yeah, and so especially the once all of you addressing you students get into working at companies and jobs and stuff, a really important part of it is doing whatever it is you're doing in any field of bioscience or any other field, is doing it respectfully and ethically, and adhering to regulations. And the very strange thing about skincare is that it is really poorly regulated. So what we had to do was find people that had built skincare companies before. And interestingly, you guys might know of Sephora, the beauty retail store. We met one of the first employees at Sephora who has mentored us, and a couple other people that work with large companies like Estee Lauder, L'Oreal. And we had to figure out, what type of testing do we actually do? So it started with, when it comes to side effects, safety testing. So we did a 50 participant 6-week clinical safety test with dermatologists to make sure that this is safe, it's not irritating, which is especially important for people with dry, aggravated skin conditions. And then we made sure it was stable, it didn't grow any bacteria and things like that. So a lot of safety testing went into it. And we advise people that have a shellfish allergy to not use the product.
I think that's wise. Um, is your skincare product used to treat other skin problems, or can it be effective on other skin problems?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And maybe we can turn it into a 30-second marketing lesson. So what we found when we figured out how it could work, as I talked about, helping the skin barrier repair itself and hydrating it, is wow, that can work for a lot of things. It can work for eczema, it could work for psoriasis, rosacea, dry skin on your scalp. It can work for some type of eczema caused by wearing a mask for too long. And so those are a lot of things. But imagine, I'm just addressing you guys at Greenville Middle School because you asked the question. Imagine if I walked into your class and I was like, hey guys, I have the best new product. It is everything for you. It is going to get you good grades. It's going to make you the coolest person in school. It's going to make you super strong, super fast, super healthy, super smart. It's going to do everything for you. You'd be like, okay, this is very overwhelming. What does this even mean? This all sounds fake. And so that was an extreme metaphor to say that in our marketing, we had to say, all right, this can do a lot of things, but we can't say, hey, it can do everything, because people would really get too overwhelmed and not believe it and not understand what it's used for. So the way that we have done it is focus on, hey, this is something really good for dry skin, typically caused by eczema, because that's what we experienced. And we really know how to help people with eczema because we had it. So we'll start by catering to people with eczema, but as we move forward, we'll say, oh, well, it can be good for that and good for that too. Once people warm up to the concept of, our brand using lobster and skincare and things like that. It was a really interesting thing to learn that. We initially thought we were going to be a brand for everyone that does everything for them, and then we had to learn to focus.
I think that's important and really interesting. And we have just a couple more left, so a couple more questions. Does the age of the lobster matter, or is it just seasonally affected? You've mentioned winter. What about the age, the size? Is that important?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I guess to think about the analogy there is um, for taking something that's found in nature. If we were to get aloe from an aloe plant, coconut oil from a coconut, the bigger the coconut is, the bigger the aloe plant is, the more stuff you typically get out of it. So the same for the lobster. The bigger the lobster, the more fluid they have. So it's great to get larger lobsters because we can get more stuff out of it. And that size is pretty much correlated to age there. At a certain point, it kind of drops off in terms of age or size versus time. But and season would definitely be directly correlated to temperature of the water and the molting cycle. So colder seasons is the best time for us.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Have you used any other marine animals in your product, or maybe have you researched any other animals?
Yeah, we haven't used any other marine animals, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to. If you guys find it interesting, there's actually a company up in Canada that is milking starfish. So I'm not the first one milking marine animals for this type of stuff. And there's a company, a lot of companies collecting what's called keyhole. I know this is a long word, keyhole limpet hemocyanin, KLH for short, KLH. And KLH has been used from limpets, which are kind of like little snails found in coastal California. And they're used, the same protein that we're getting from lobster, they're using this snail protein in vaccines. And they use it because as you add the protein to a drug and then give that drug to people, the protein is stimulating the body's immune response. So let's say you have some type of cancerous tumor, for example, you would give somebody a drug that is targeted for this type of cancer, but when you give it to them and you want the body to help it, not work against it. So they add the protein to this drug and kind of put them together and give it to people so that when the drug and the protein get there, the drug does what it's supposed to do on the cancer, for example, but the protein stimulates the immune response, which is the body's way to fight off disease. So you're kind of getting a 1-2 punch, hitting that cancer tumor with the drug as well as a superpowered immune system. So there are a lot more marine creatures too. Shrimp. If you guys have learned about the phylogenetic scale and well, not necessarily that, but the animal kingdom and all the different ways it breaks down. Lobsters are arthropods, and so are a lot of other things like spiders and mosquitoes and weird stuff like that. And they all have this protein too. I'm not endorsing that you go out hunting for mosquitoes or anything like that, or spiders, but there's a lot that's found in nature that allow these different creatures to do these incredible things. Have you ever wondered how a spider, and I don't know the answer to this, I just think it's interesting, a spider can jump like 20 plus times its height. We can't even jump our own height. There's so many interesting things that go on in nature that are just undiscovered, and probably the spider thing is known. I just don't know it off the top of my head, but yeah.
That's so cool. I think this was super interesting. I'm going to ask you one more question that I have here, because I know that you studied bioengineering. So what is bioengineering? Is it engineering? I have one question here that says, what are some bioscience jobs related to engineering? And that's going to be our last question.
Um, yeah, so bioengineering, it's just two words combined together, biology, which is the study of life, plants and animals, and then engineering, which is building things, building tools, building solutions. And so I like to interpret bioengineering as building tools and solutions to learn about and help life in biological things. And that can be a lot of things. It could be, a company that you guys learned about called IDEX making tools to diagnose if your pet is sick, tools to treat your pet if they're sick. Or what if your pet has an injury and they need a little cast or some type of thing on their leg? That's bioengineering too. Same with learning how to grow a certain type of plant, or studying about the life cycle of the earth and the ecosystem and things like that. It's tools and solutions and just engineering applied to life. So when it comes to jobs, it really comes down to anything that fits that really, really big definition. I have friends, that graduated with me that are now working in large greenhouses and producing, genetically engineered crops. I have friends that are working at IDEX making those tests, like, for your pets. And then some went and became doctors. The really interesting thing about bioengineering is that you don't specialize, but you learn how to speak all the scientific languages, if that makes sense. So we can talk to chemists, biologists, mathematicians, physicists, mechanical engineers that, make tools and metalworking and things like that. So you just learn how to talk, speak all the language, understand how all of these different things work, and you can really do whatever you want to do, which is what I love about bioengineering. And I think that's the reason that I've been able to be an entrepreneur, is because we can understand every part of the process of what we're doing.
Awesome. So guys, if anybody likes biology, but you also like engineering, it doesn't mean you have to pick one over the other. You can go into bioengineering and then combine the two. Patrick, thank you so much. This was super cool and fascinating. I think we all learned a lot. I know I did. I will see you on Friday, and then thank you to all of our students and schools that joined us today. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.